Hey everyone, welcome back. Are you ready for another deep dive?
I am.
Today we're going to be looking at something pretty massive, and that's the Ghana Constitution.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Constitution's kind of a snooze fest, right?
They can be.
Yeah, but I promise this one is really interesting.
I think so.
And we're going to find all those fascinating little nuggets that are tucked away in there.
Yeah.
Things like what happens if the president and the vice president are both incapacitated?
Oh, that's a good question.
The answer might surprise you.
Yeah.
We're also going to look at this really unique concept of land ownership called stool lands.
Oh, interesting.
And did you know that the Ghana Constitution actually dictates how political parties have to be run?
I did not know that.
We're going to explore all of those things and more, so buckle up. Let's deep dive into the Ghana Constitution.
All right. Sounds good.
So I think it's always good to start at the beginning with any constitution, just to lay the groundwork.
Sure.
So let's talk about the preamble. What is a preamble? It's like the mission statement, right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. It's setting the tone for the whole document.
Yeah.
It's really like an introduction. It kind of tells you what the document is about, and it really sets the stage.
And what does the Ghana Constitution preamble say in a nutshell?
Well, in a nutshell, it talks about freedom, justice, probity, and accountability.
Okay.
Right from the start, it's really emphasizing that the power lies with the people.
It's interesting how it specifically says the sovereign will of the people.
Yeah.
It's almost like a declaration, this Constitution is about empowering citizens.
Yes.
And it goes beyond just words, though, right?
Yes.
Because the Constitution also lays out how these principles are going to be put into practice.
Right. It provides the framework for how these principles are going to be put into action.
So let's talk about how it does that.
Okay.
I guess the first thing is Chapter 1, which establishes the Constitution as the supreme law of the land.
Yes, exactly. The supreme law of the land, meaning it trumps every other law. Every other law has to be in line with the Constitution.
It's the top dog.
It is the top dog.
So anything that contradicts the Constitution is null and void.
Exactly.
It's really interesting how it really is trying to guarantee that, the core principles of democracy and citizens' rights are going to be protected.
Right. So you've got this bedrock, which is the Constitution,
Yeah.
and then everything else has to be built on top of that.
Yeah, it's the foundation.
It's the foundation.
And to make sure that foundation is extra strong, Article 2 actually empowers citizens to challenge anything that they think goes against the Constitution.
Yeah, I love that. And that is so important because it's not just a document that's sitting on a shelf.
Right.
It's something that people can use.
Like a living document.
It is a living document.
And then Article 3 kind of takes this a step further, and it specifically prohibits one-party states and any attempts to suppress political activity.
That's right. It's saying we are going to have a multi-party democracy.
It shows how committed Ghana is to this multi-party democracy.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
Now, the Constitution also gets into this idea of belonging right from the start. Like, Chapter 3 is all about citizenship. Like, who is a Ghanaian?
Yes, exactly.
You can be a Ghanaian by birth or by other means, like if you're married to a Ghanaian or you've lived in Ghana for a certain amount of time.
And you know what's fascinating about that?
What?
One of the requirements to be registered as a citizen is that you have to be able to speak and understand an indigenous language of Ghana.
Whoa, I did not know that. That's so interesting.
It is.
Why do you think that's so important?
I think it really emphasizes that it's about more than just legal status. It's really about embracing sort of the culture of Ghana.
Yeah, it's like you're not just getting citizenship on paper.
Right.
You're actually becoming a part of the fabric of Ghanaian society.
Yeah.
So now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the legal system, because obviously the Constitution is a legal document.
Yep.
Chapter 4, what does that tell us?
Well, it outlines the different sources of law that are recognized in Ghana.
Okay.
And it's not just the Constitution.
So we have the Constitution at the top, but what else is there?
You've got enactments made by Parliament, the laws they've made. You've got existing law.
Okay.
You've got common law. You've got customary law. It's a really interesting blend of different legal traditions.
It really is. It's like this legal ecosystem.
It is.
Now, things start to get really interesting in Chapter 5 because this is where we get into fundamental human rights and freedoms.
Right.
And let me tell you, the Ghana Constitution does not pull around when it comes to protecting its citizens.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. This is where it gets serious.
It's a pretty big chapter.
It is.
So Article 12 kind of sets the stage. What does it say?
It says that everyone in Ghana is entitled to these fundamental rights and freedoms no matter who they are.
It's saying no discrimination.
No discrimination.
And then the Constitution goes on to break down these rights in detail.
Right, so it gets really specific.
Yeah, so Article 13 focuses on the right to life.
Right, which is pretty fundamental.
Yeah.
You can't really have anything else without that.
So even in really extreme situations, the government can't just take a life without due process.
Exactly.
Which is really important.
It is.
And then we have Article 14, which is about personal liberty.
That's right.
So, you can't be arrested or detained without a really good reason.
Right, you had to be charged with a crime.
You have the right to a lawyer.
You do.
No one is getting thrown in jail arbitrarily here.
Nope.
Then you have Article 15, which goes even further and talks about respect for human dignity.
Right.
No torture.
No torture.
No cruel treatment, no degrading treatment.
Exactly. It's saying every person deserves to be treated with respect.
It's really a powerful statement about how everyone deserves to be treated with basic human decency.
It is.
And the Constitution doesn't stop there, right? It goes on to talk about freedom from slavery.
That's true.
Forced labor, equality, freedom from discrimination.
Right.
All really important stuff.
Yeah.
It's clear that whoever put this Constitution together, they really wanted to create a society where everyone could live with dignity and freedom.
Exactly. And we've just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to talk about when it comes to the rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Ghana Constitution.
Well, I'm definitely ready to dive in deeper.
You know, it's so interesting how the Constitution really balances those individual rights with the broader needs of society.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of that balance, Article 18, what does that one do?
Well, that one focuses on privacy.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It is, especially in this day and age, you know, with all the technology and everything. It's so easy to have your privacy infringed on.
So it's basically saying you have the right to your own private space.
Yes, your own thoughts, your own communications, all that.
Yeah, it's like drawing a line in the sand.
Exactly.
So then, of course, we have Article 19, which talks about the right to a fair trial.
Yes. Yes, a cornerstone of any justice system that respects the rule of law.
This is where things get really serious. Everyone deserves a chance to defend themselves, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, you have the right to be heard in court. You are innocent until proven guilty.
You have the right to a lawyer.
You do.
It's really about ensuring that justice is served.
Exactly.
Not just handing out punishments.
Right.
Then there's Article 21, the right to freedom of movement.
Yes, that's a big one too.
So this means you can move around freely throughout Ghana.
Yes.
Choose where you live. You can even travel abroad if you want.
That's right.
So it's interesting how the Constitution gets into even the more personal aspects of life.
Yeah.
Like Article 22 talks about property rights within a marriage.
Uh-huh.
So this is interesting because it's specifically protecting the property rights of spouses.
Right. Particularly when it comes to inheritance.
Okay, so even if there's a will, a spouse can't be just completely left out.
That's right. The idea is that both spouses have contributed both financially and otherwise to the marriage, and so they both deserve to be taken care of.
It's like a safety net.
Yeah, you could say that.
Now, Article 23, this one kind of shifts gears a little bit, talks about administrative justice.
Yes, yes, and this is really important because it's about ensuring that government bodies act fairly.
What does that actually mean, administrative justice?
It means that when you interact with government bodies, when they're making decisions that affect you, they have to follow certain procedures.
Okay.
They can't just do whatever they want. They have to be reasonable.
So it's about holding the government accountable,
Exactly.
even in just their everyday operations.
That's right. And if you feel like a government body has acted unfairly, you can actually challenge their decision in court.
Checks and balances in action.
Checks and balances, exactly. Now, let's move on to some of the economic and social rights that are protected by the Constitution.
Okay.
So, for instance, Article 24, that tackles economic rights.
Like the right to work.
Yes, the right to work. But it's even broader than that. It talks about the right to work under satisfactory, equitable, and humane conditions.
Okay.
So not just you have the right to a job, but you have the right to a job that's decent.
It's trying to create a fair and just workplace for everyone.
Exactly, exactly. Then you have Article 25, which focuses on educational rights.
This is a big one.
Huge, yeah. Basic education should be free, compulsory, and available to all.
So this is really saying that education is the foundation of a strong and prosperous nation.
Yes, absolutely.
And then Article 26 gets into cultural rights.
Right. The right to enjoy, practice, profess, maintain, and promote any culture, language, tradition, or religion that you want, as long as it doesn't conflict with the Constitution, obviously.
So it's about celebrating that diversity.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Ghana has such a rich cultural heritage, and this article is really saying, let's embrace all of that.
It's about protecting people's cultural identity.
It is. And then we can't forget about the most vulnerable members of society.
Yeah, the children.
The children, exactly. Article 28 lays out the rights of children.
So what does that say?
It says that children have the right to special care, assistance, and maintenance. Basically, they need extra protection.
Because they are the future.
They are.
And what about people with disabilities?
Also a very important group. Article 29 focuses on protecting their rights.
Okay.
And it talks about the right to live with dignity, the right to be protected from exploitation, and the right to access appropriate facilities in public spaces.
So it's really trying to make sure that everyone, regardless of their abilities, can fully participate in society.
Exactly, exactly. And all these articles, they demonstrate a strong commitment to inclusivity and social justice.
It's really impressive how detailed and comprehensive this Constitution is. I mean, it's covering so much ground.
It really is. And we're not even done yet. We still have to explore the directive principles of state policy, which are basically goals that the government should strive for in building a better Ghana.
Well, that sounds like a great place to pick up in the next part of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back, and we're ready to finish our deep dive into the Ghana Constitution.
I'm ready.
Last time we were talking about the directive principles of state policy.
Yeah.
Now, these aren't actual enforceable laws, are they?
No, they're not. Think of them more as guiding principles, aspirations for the government.
So they're like a roadmap for how to build a better Ghana.
Exactly.
So let's look at some specific examples. What kind of things do these directive principles cover?
Well, they cover a pretty wide range. For instance, Article 34 talks about the government promoting a planned and self-reliant economy.
Okay, so it's about building a strong and sustainable future.
Right. Being independent, being in control of your own destiny.
And then we have Article 35, which lays out the political objectives, like reaffirming that commitment to democracy.
Yes. Freedom, justice, all of that.
It's like a reminder of those core values.
Exactly.
And then Article 36, what's that one about?
That one focuses on the economic objectives. So things like ensuring a fair distribution of wealth,
Okay.
creating opportunities for all.
So not just economic growth, but making sure that everyone benefits from that growth.
Exactly. And then there's Article 37, which really focuses on the social objectives. Providing access to healthcare, social security, all those important things.
Like creating a safety net.
Yeah, exactly.
And to make sure Ghana has a really well-educated population, we have Article 38.
Right. Education is key, right?
Yeah.
Equal access to education at all levels.
And it also emphasizes science and technology.
Yeah, that's really important for development.
Then we have Article 39. What does that one address?
That one talks about the cultural objectives, trying to integrate customary values into national life,
Okay.
but also abolishing harmful traditional practices.
So it's that balance between preserving the culture, but also moving forward.
Right, exactly.
Now let's get into the real nitty-gritty, the electoral system.
Okay, the heart of democracy.
Yeah, so Chapter 7, what does that one tell us about how Ghana chooses its leaders?
Well, it all starts with the Electoral Commission.
Hmm?
Article 42 establishes this independent body that's responsible for, conducting elections.
So they're like the referees, making sure everything is fair.
Exactly.
And then we have Article 45, which talks about the qualifications to be a voter.
Right. Universal adult suffrage.
Okay, so everyone who's a citizen and meets the age requirement can vote.
That's the idea.
And then there's Article 55, and this one's about political parties.
Yes, the political landscape.
So what kind of rules does the Constitution set for political parties?
Well, first of all, it guarantees your right to form a party.
Okay, that's important.
But it also sets some ground rules, to make sure that the democracy stays healthy.
Like what?
Well, for example,
Yep.
parties have to have a national character, meaning they can't be based on just one ethnic group or one region.
So it's about promoting unity.
Exactly. And then there's also rules about transparency, like parties have to publicly declare their revenues and assets.
It's about accountability.
Accountability, exactly. Now, let's move on to the executive branch. Chapter 8, the powerhouse of the government.
The president. What are their roles and responsibilities?
Well, Article 57 says that the president is the head of state, head of government, and commander-in-chief of the armed forces.
So a lot of power there.
A lot of power, a lot of responsibility. They're responsible for implementing laws, directing policy, representing Ghana on the world stage.
And how is the president elected?
Article 60 lays out the process. It's pretty straightforward. You need to win more than 50% of the vote.
So a clear mandate from the people.
Exactly. And then just in case, something happens and the president can't do their job, Article 59 lays out the line of succession.
Okay.
So first it would be the vice president, and if they're unavailable, then the Speaker of Parliament steps in.
So there's always a backup plan.
Always a backup plan. Now, let's step into the halls of Parliament.
This is where the laws are made.
This is it, Chapter 10. Article 93 says that Parliament has the power to make laws.
And to make sure they take that power seriously, there's an oath they have to take, right?
Right. Article 100, oath of allegiance, oath of office. They're pledging to uphold the Constitution.
They're pledging to serve the nation.
Exactly. And Article 106 outlines the process for actually making laws.
Okay, so it's a pretty involved process. There are readings and committees.
Yeah, it's not a quick thing.
And then, of course, there's the presidential assent at the end.
Right. The president has to sign off on it.
And to make sure Parliament isn't just, going rogue, Article 108 says they can't impose taxes or spend public money without the president's approval.
Checks and balances. Always important. Now let's move on to the guardians of justice, the judiciary.
The courts.
The courts. Chapter 11. Article 125 establishes the superior courts of judicature. So you've got the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal, the High Court, regional tribunals, all that.
And each court handles different types of cases, right?
That's right. At the top, you've got the Supreme Court, the ultimate decider.
And what kind of cases do they handle?
Well, Article 129 says they have exclusive jurisdiction over matters relating to the Constitution.
Okay, so they're the ones who interpret the Constitution.
They are. And then Article 133 talks about the right of appeal.
Okay.
So, if you don't like the decision of a lower court, you can appeal to a higher court.
Makes sense.
Now, this is a really interesting part. Chapter 12 focuses on the freedom and independence of the media.
This is so important in a democracy.
It is. Article 162, freedom and independence of the media. No censorship allowed.
So journalists can do their job without interference.
That's the idea. And to make sure there are diverse viewpoints, Article 163 says that state-owned media has to give fair opportunities for dissenting views.
So even if you disagree with the government, you should still have a chance to be heard.
Exactly. Now, let's talk money. Chapter 13, the rules for managing public funds.
Very important.
Article 174 establishes the consolidated fund. This is where all the government revenue goes.
The big pot of money.
The big pot of money. And then just in case, there's an emergency, Article 177 creates a contingency fund.
For those unexpected situations.
Right. And then to make sure everything is above board, Article 187 establishes the Auditor General.
Now, who's the Auditor General?
That's an independent person who audits the government's accounts.
Yeah.
Make sure they're not doing anything shady.
They're the watchdog.
They're the watchdog.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at some of the institutions that help ensure good governance, starting with Chapter 14, the Public Services Commission.
So they're like the HR department for the government.
Yeah, basically. They handle recruitment, promotions, discipline, all that.
And then Chapter 15, the police service.
Right. Maintaining law and order, protecting lives and property.
Keeping everyone safe.
Exactly. And then you've got the prison service, Chapter 16. They're responsible for the prisoners, making sure they're safe, but also trying to rehabilitate them.
So it's not just about punishment. It's about giving people a second chance.
Exactly. Chapter 17, the armed forces, protecting the nation.
From external threats.
Exactly. And then we have Chapter 18. This one's really important. The Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice.
So what do?
They have a big job. They protect human rights, investigate complaints of injustice.
They're like the protectors of the people.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And then to make sure everyone understands their rights and responsibilities, we have Chapter 19, the National Commission for Civic Education.
Education is so important.
It really is. And then we get to Chapter 20, decentralization and local government, giving power to the people.
So it's about letting communities manage their own affairs.
Exactly. Chapter 21, lands and natural resources, making sure those are managed sustainably.
Land is so important.
It is. And then there's Chapter 22, chieftaincy, recognizing the role of traditional leaders.
So it's about finding that balance between tradition and modernity.
Exactly. And if there's ever a need to investigate something, we have Chapter 23, commissions of inquiry.
So they can be set up to look into specific issues.
That's right. Now we're getting close to the end here. Chapter 25, the amendment process.
So the Constitution can be changed.
It can, but there's a process. Got to make sure any changes are done carefully.
And finally, Chapter 26, all the miscellaneous stuff.
Yeah, the loose ends, legal aid, claims against the government, all that.
Wow, we really covered a lot today.
We did.
The Ghana Constitution is such a fascinating document, so comprehensive.
It really is. It covers so much.
It's a real testament to Ghana's commitment to democracy and to its people.
It really is. One final thought for everyone listening. The Ghana Constitution is very specific about media freedom. How does that compare to other countries? What does that tell us about Ghana?
That's a great question, something to think about. Well, this deep dive has been incredibly informative. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been my pleasure.
And thank you to everyone listening. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.